I want to begin with this little disclaimer. This is not a rant about capitalism. I'm the biggest advocate for capitalism, real capitalism that you'll find. This isn't even a critique of crony capitalism, although that needs to be discussed as we progress further, looking into the deep state, big pharma, big food, military, industrial complex, and everything else plaguing our country right now. This is an analysis on control. What our enemies are using against us to control what we think, the causes that we support, the way we plan for our retirement, the way we feed our families or heat our homes, on and on. The death of free will. For example, before I get back to Chomsky and his book, here's a little George Orwell from 1984. Quote, "Films, football, beer, and above all, gambling filled up the horizon of their minds. To keep them in control was not difficult." Just change, still films, Netflix, football, yep, beer, booze, drugs, whatever. Gambling, the internet filled up the horizon of their minds. That's what's happening. Now, Orwell wrote this long before George Floyd and the birth of modern corporate activism. He had no idea about organizations like the World Economic Forum or ESG. Orwell was talking ultimately about the dangers of consumerism, which goes back to the Wilson administration. And Edward Bernays said, the problem with this country is we have a group of people that pay attention to their needs. We need to change them into people of wants. And they did. Consumerism. Now, how consumerism provides a distraction to what's really is going on is really important. If an authoritarian government holds the reins of the corporate elite, like in the 21st century fascism, then we become slaves unknowingly to their entire agenda. That's where we've been. Tuesday, we woke up. Now, there's no question about it. After the spread of ESG and DEI and the woke agenda, big corporations are in bed with the government. They call them public-private partners. Okay, that's the literal definition of fascism. Making good products really becomes secondary. Making money, well, that comes down to whether they toe the government line. If you will say the right things, of course, you'll make money. Banks will give you loans. Orwell's nightmare, as far as control is concerned, is now our reality. Just imagine the power this provides. Imagine the money. This is why Donald Trump and anyone who works with him is in danger. When you look at all the consumer brands, do you know how many companies own over 550 consumer brands? The number is 12. Look at this graphic. There is not anything that we don't consume, buy, use that doesn't trace back to just a handful of corporations. 12. But again, this isn't an anti-corporation rant. By all means, make money, grow your companies, do what you have to do. But the orange man cometh, okay? He's got a plan for you. Now, I want to talk to you about ownership here. When the unholy alliance between government takes place with government and capitalism or corporations, that's where we have a problem. How many of these companies have come to openly endorse and embrace DEI, ESG, and all the other whacked out progressive crusades over the past decade? Almost all of them. This same exact model is what has happened to the American propaganda complex, the mainstream media. Let me switch back to Noam Chomsky here in his Manufacturing Consent. This is Chomsky back in the 80s on how the legacy media controls the public. Watch.
Now, the elite media are the agenda-setting media. That means the New York Times, the Washington Post, the major television channels, and so on. They set the general framework. Local media more or less adapt to their structure. And they do this in all sorts of ways, by selection of topics, by distribution of concerns, by emphasis and framing of issues, by filtering of information, by bounding of debate within certain limits. 2.5 minutes to air. 45 seconds. determine, they select, they shape, they control, they restrict in order to serve the interests of dominant elite groups in society.
Did you notice years ago we used to complain about gas prices once the media was on it? But if it was a Democrat in office and the media wouldn't rail about it, this last time, nobody was talking about high gas prices except in small little circles because the elites in society, the demographic that Chomsky identified as the ones that control the country, weren't talking about it. And now it's only a subsection of progressives and Kamala Harris that is gaining ground with the progressives and the Kamala Harris voters. The media selects the topics to be covered. They gatekeep. They set the agenda. That agenda is all but hand-delivered to them by the same elites within Washington, D.C. and the corporate public-private partnership. Great example of this is a few days before the election. The New York Times targeted conservatives and independent media that broadcast on YouTube. Why? Why were they hand-delivered the talking points by Clinton and Democratic operatives at Media Matters? The elite in government and business set the agenda. Their propagandists in the media churn it out like it's a little demonic factory. Just little demons working, printing this stuff all the time. Chomsky called this, and then it was followed like a Hollywood movie script. Tell me this isn't planned.